looking into the international landscape on green hydrogen. We have our plenary session 7, which is on inviting the Germany's perspective. As you know that in these 3 days, apart from showcasing and highlighting the breakthroughs which India has been able to make towards its green hydrogen mission, we're also inviting, in the very spirit of collaborations with the other countries, their perspective and their inroads which they have been able to make. So we have Germany's perspective, which is going to be presented in plenary session 7. These are going to be two sessions going almost back to back. And we then have in this very hall the quiz, which is, as we announced earlier, we have a quiz with the plenary rounds. The preliminary rounds have already taken place, and finally we have the finalists. There are 5 teams which are participating in that, and the first, second, third are going to be selected in this quiz competition. So the quiz competition also happens here. It's going to be after the two plenary sessions, starting at 11:45. Plenaries we shall be closing, if you are good. The morning we. Okay, I'll just confirm you on the timings of the quiz. I think it's in this hall. So the quiz timing has been changed, and it's going to be from 2 to 3:30, and it's going to be in this very hall itself. And then we have our breakout sessions for the day, which are going to be on level 1. So we have our breakout sessions, new and innovative startups in green hydrogen, electrolyzers. That's going to be at level 1, meeting room 6. We have our next breakout session, the same time, 11:45 to 1, financing green hydrogen, bridging the cost gap. That's again at level 1. So all the breakout sessions are in level 1. This is going to be in meeting room 7. We have the session on developing port infrastructure for green hydrogen ecosystem, bunkering and refueling. That's going to be in meeting room 9, level 1, and strengthening the R&D ecosystem. That's in meeting room 10, level 1. Post lunch, lunch break of 1 hour, 1 to 2, and then post lunch, as announced, we have the quiz here. We also have our breakout sessions, which is again at level 1. Meeting room 6, building a green hydrogen workforce, public sector undertaking, PSU initiatives, pilots in green hydrogen sector. That's the session which we have in meeting room 7, level 1. Green ammonia and fertilizer industry, that's in meeting room 9. And further building on partnerships and collaboration with the US, that's the India-US cooperation green hydrogen sector, that's in meeting room 10. 3:15 to 4:30, we'll be having our other breakout sessions, green hydrogen policy in Indian states. So going state-wise, that's going to be highlighted of, again, bringing in the India's green hydrogen policy, which we have for our states. Meeting room 6, it happens at from 3:15 to 4:30. And the session on natural resource management, digital approaches for better implementation of green hydrogen ecosystem. That's going to be in meeting room 7, level 1. The last session, the closing session, valedictory session, is going to be from 4:30 to 5:30, where we bring you the complete synopsis of these 3 days, what we have absorbed, and that's going to be a presentation towards that, or a film is going to be presented in the last session. Therein, we are going to be joined by our Honorable Minister of State for New and Renewable Energy, Shri Shripad Yesu Naik ji, is going to be joining us as the chief guest of the last session. 1 hour session, and then we are going to be concluding, we're going to be closing this 3 day. But then from there, actually, the action starts, what we have absorbed, taking it, converting our walking the talk then starts after the closing session. So, welcome to all of you, and Kindly take your seats. Please have your mobile phones on the silent mode. We start in a while, just waiting for our distinguished speakers of the session joining us, and then we start going to be starting with this plenary session 6, inviting and looking into international landscape on green hydrogen, exploring the long-term outlook for hydrogen. So, good morning to everyone once again, and welcome to the plenary session 6, in which we explore the long term outlook for hydrogen. I invite the distinguished chair of the session, Mr. Prashant Kumar Singh, Officer on Special Duty to the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. May I request you, sir, to please grace the dais? Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Prashant Singh is going to be shortly taking over as the Secretary MNRE. We are delighted and honored to have him here as the distinguished chair of the session. Shri Singh was the CEO of the government e-market for almost 3.5 years. During his tenure, government e-market witnessed almost 11x growth to become the largest public procurement platform in the world. Shri Singh has also served as a Deputy Secretary, Ministry of Steel. Therein, he was instrumental in formulating the steel policy and has also been the Joint Secretary, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. He has a master's degree in public policy and sustainable development from Terry University. I invite the distinguished speaker of the session, Ms. Gauri Singh, Deputy Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency, the first international organization which focuses exclusively on renewable energy. Ms. Singh brings more than 30 years of experience in policy advocacy and project implementation within the field of renewable energy and sustainable development from India and internationally. So, as I welcome both our distinguished chair and the speaker, I now request the chair for the opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone. It's actually heartening to see that on the third day we have an almost full house. And over the last 2 days, I've been attending some sessions, and it's actually been overflowing with people. I mean, the gates have been open and people are looking even from the gates. So I can very well congratulate the organizers for putting up a great show. And over the last 2 days, ma'am, we have been hearing some very heavy stuff about the lightest element on earth. So it's been very interesting. Uh, we have heard panelists, we have heard distinguished speakers, country experts talk about different aspects of development of hydrogen as an alternate fuel. And it's been very encouraging. Two things are very clear. One is that it is definitely happening and happening at a very rapid pace, probably much before what was initially anticipated. Number two, there's a huge amount of buzz, and everywhere in the world, what we see is that there are challenges, but the level of innovations coming up on a daily basis to address those is again phenomenal. There's positivity all around. And ladies and gentlemen, today, without much ado, let me introduce ma'am. She's a service senior as well. We have looked up to her in the past, and we look up to her now as well. She's a global expert. She's the Deputy Director General at the IRENA. And today she'll be talking about the international perspective, how things stand, how things are shaping up, what are the challenges, what we can learn as a group. And let me tell you what I could feel in the last 2 days is that there is a sense of co-ownership by everybody, ma'am. I mean, everybody is looking towards collaboration based on outcome, based on trust. How best we can all give it shape so that we all end up with a much more healthier planet, and we leave it to our children better than what we had inherited. Uh, I would now, I think, ladies and gentlemen, let's put all our hands together to welcome Ms. Gauri Singh and hear from her experience. Ma'am, please.
Thank you so much, Prashant ji, and good morning. And it's really good to be here in this conference, and to see the level of participation. It's really quite amazing. And as you said, on the third day, normally you don't see a participation like this. So clearly, this is a topic that has generated a lot of interest, not just in India but globally. And I can't promise you that there won't be some more heavy stuff. But what I'll do is I do want to take you through a presentation, because sometimes when you look at it visually, it probably says more than uh, anything that I can say. So what I'll do is I'll just go and do a short presentation, and then of course we can have an interaction. So, I like starting with this slide just so that, it gives you a sense of where we are going in terms of the energy consumption. So this gives you a total final energy consumption mix as it stands today and what a net zero really means. And if you can see, it's quite stark. The entire fossil fuel part of it becomes narrowed down to about 12%. Hydrogen, as you can see, is going to play a very important role, about 14%, as will modern biomass. But if I were to look at three important drivers for this whole energy transition to happen, then it is that we are now moving into a more electrified world where electricity will become the main carrier for energy. We are looking at more than 51% uh, of electricity, direct electricity contributing to the energy mix. And we renewables will play a very important role right now. If I look at what electricity is, it says 20%, it's about 22%, out of which currently it's about 28% is renewables. But when we move into the 51% electricity, it's going to be dominated by nearly 90% of it will come from renewables. And even in renewables, it's going to be mostly variable renewables. So solar and wind is what we are expecting will be the main uh, actors in that. The second thing that you can see is that the um, the square has become smaller. That's become smaller because we will be increasing energy efficiency will play a very large role. And energy efficiency, along with renewables and more electrification of the end use sector, is what is going to drive the green energy transition as we visualize to 2050. And this is broadly what I wanted to show in this, just to give you a global perspective. Now, what's going to happen to hydrogen? Hydrogen is, it's currently, you do have about 100 million tons getting produced every year, which is being used um, for the refinery sector, for fertilizer production, but all of it is gray. And green hydrogen is expected to really go up and be about 530 million tons a year. And along with that, naturally, the electrolyzer capacity is going to be dramatically, it'll move forward very, very quickly. So, the point here is that, we are not even prepared for the kind of renewable energy that will be needed for green hydrogen. And to give you a perspective, right now in the globally, we consume about 22,000 terawatt hours. And to produce the kind of green hydrogen that we want to see in 2050, it will require nearly the same amount of electricity that's being consumed today. So that's the kind of increase in renewable energy that we need. And also, when you're looking at production of hydrogen, naturally water, land, and all those other elements will be definitely required. So I think we shouldn't forget that hydrogen it'll remain an expensive energy resource for quite some time. And the guiding assumption for policymakers and for all of us who are getting into this sector should be that it should really, the focus or the priority should be to on the hard to abate sectors. Hard to abate sectors being steel, chemicals, long haul transportation, shipping, long shipping, and for other applications, we need to keep focusing on direct electrification. So this is broadly what this is showing. And I think although, in Africa, for example, there's a lot of excitement in Africa because they have very good renewable energy resources. But if you're looking at, there are also a lot of bilateral arrangements that are being done between North Africa and Europe for supplying green hydrogen for meeting the requirements of Europe. But if you look at how this how this will actually evolve, um, I mean, what you can see here is two scenarios: a optimistic scenario, and you can see a maybe a more pessimistic or a normalized scenario. And what's important here is that everyone talks about international trade. I mean, Chile, for example, had been talking about becoming the hydrogen exporter to the world. But our estimation now shows that 55% of what gets produced will also get consumed domestically. And it's not sorry, 75% is going to get consumed domestically, and the 25% that does get exported through pipelines or through shipping, that's a very small percentage. So what countries have to look at is really focus on how hydrogen production can be utilized for domestic consumption, because that probably is going to be the dominant characteristic of how hydrogen gets consumed. We do expect that the levelized cost of hydrogen will go down substantially. In fact, by 2050, the expectation is that it should be 1.5 dollars per kilo. But as I can tell you, we have all been wrong about how quickly and swiftly the levelized cost for solar went down. So I wouldn't be surprised if this kind of a projection will also actually happen much faster than what we are anticipating. Um, I think what's another very important aspect is that there is a difference between, I mean, technically, it might be possible to produce much more hydrogen, and economically also maybe, but what also needs to be considered is the availability of land, availability of water. What are the kind of policies that country has? Are those policies investment friendly? What is the political risk of that country? What is the cost of capital that hydrogen investment will come with? So there are many factors that will actually um, uh, you know um, make a difference in terms of which countries will then emerge as being the champions of the global trade, and the ones that will our sense is that the ones that can scale up the consumption domestically are the ones that will bring the cost down most rapidly. So innovation in trade is obviously going to be the key. And here, what's important is that the harmonization of carbon certification needs to be done in a way that the environmental concerns and the market growth can be balanced. And there are many countries and many stakeholders that are already looking at, where at the ports where which can become the hub. Uh, the the issue that is still out there in the open is what really will be the carrier for hydrogen. Will it be methanol? Will it be ammonia? And because the infrastructure will be different depending on which pathway gets chosen. So a lot of ports that we've been speaking to and port authorities, they are still struggling to see which is the hydrogen carrier that they would be using, and also calling upon the governments to create those long-term policies that can bring visibility for investment and investors. So clearly, I mean, there are many barriers that need to be overcome. And if I had to speak on some of the priorities for especially the quality infrastructure that needs to be done, then I think it cannot be stressed enough that the standards have to be aligned with market growth potentials and market trends. Skilled personnel have to be have to be trained in our institutions. These are not things that happen overnight. Investment in skilled personnel is going to be the key and really the make or break factor. I have heard from many CEOs across the world that talent is going to be the main challenge that most of them will face, and that naturally means that the countries that have the talent to drive this growth in hydrogen are going to emerge as winners. This is clearly a big area that India needs to start thinking of right away. um, then another thing which is important is that although we have the BIS, that is our standardization body in India, standards cross are being developed by many international bodies, and I'm sure the ministry is deeply involved in setting of these standards. Because if the accounting, the carbon accounting, and the traceability has to happen, which is the key here, then standards are going to play a very important role. And the aspect that we have to look at as a country is, are we as India going to be a passive receiver of standards, or as a leader of developing countries play a significant role in shaping how the standards play out? And I think I don't need to stress that again, standards are going to play a very major role in the way manufacturing happens, in the way that electrolyzer manufacturing can take place in countries, and how hydrogen can be produced and exported for global trade. So finally, I think this is something that's important for both the thinking when we talk about innovation, but also when we talk about policy making, that the approach has to be a systemic approach, not just focusing on technology and infrastructure, which policies do, but also looking at how the market design and regulation can can incentivize smart electrification, growth of how variable power can get integrated into our grid infrastructure, and regulations that actually also promote the same. System planning and operation, I don't need to stress enough, because with more smart electrification coming in, which is really a cost-effective decarbonization pathway for getting in more electrification of the end use sector, but also enabling much more renewables to come in, uh, and also bringing in the flexibility. These are the challenges that system operators will face, and the planning has to be done to be able to incorporate that. Business models definitely will play a very big role, and I think when we talk about policy making, then my experience is that policies that promote one or two business models are never good. The idea should be to let innovation happen in business models, but keep the regulations to what need to be regulated. And I think I mean, I'll just stop with just a couple of examples from the UK, which has um, gone for much more supply-driven incentives, which are basically, they've said that they will give a viability gap funding for producers of green hydrogen um, till such time as the cost of green hydrogen can come at par with the with gas. In Europe, for example, is both supply side incentives, but a lot of demand side incentives. And I think a good policy has to actually have both supply and demand side incentives for it to work. Because if you don't have off takers for what gets produced, or no incentive for say the utilization of green steel or green fertilizer in the country, and it cannot get consumed in this way, then you can expect that there will be some green hydrogen manufacturing that will happen, but mostly for export. Whereas I think the opportunity here is to make sure that this can actually be a decarbonization strategy for domestic hard to abate sectors like refineries, like fertilizer, and steel. So I'll end with that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, ma'am, and thanks for setting the tone for the third day deliberations. And I'm sure there may be a lot of questions. I think we can take five, six questions if you permit. Anybody can, yeah. Can somebody hand over a mic, please?
Okay, I also have. Hello. Well, my name is Dushyant Kothari from High Urja Fuel Systems Private Limited. Madam, you mentioned that to achieve net zero by 2050, you require 22,000 terawatt hours of renewables. Is that correct? So that works out to be 22 terawatt hours per day capacity, terawatt hour
So
capacity.
so it's
So,
it's it's 20,000 terawatt hours that would be needed, and right now globally, the global electricity that we generate is about 22,000 terawatt hours.
yeah, so I think per day capacity which is required will be 1 gigawatt power per day. Is that possible?
See, that's what we need to think about, because if you remember in the G20 last year, what the G20 countries, when they did the Delhi Declaration, they said that we would like to move from the 3.9 terawatts that we have as renewable energy to about 11.4 terawatts. So the pace at which renewables will need to expand has to be, it's not something that will happen overnight. But if I give you an example of
No,
what happened last year, uh, last year for the first time we saw a record growth in the renewables capacity of about 14%, which was a record high, and nearly 500 gigawatts got deployed. So the momentum that needs to be put in place has to be quite, it cannot be a business as usual. And if you're looking at how much will need to be done on a day basis, I think it's a
it
huge.
is 1 gigawatt per day,
Yes,
which is
so
equal
it's a
to one nuclear power plant per day, which I think with present technology is not possible. That's what I was trying.
so I think the trajectory that you will have to see is that it's an exponential growth trajectory that we are looking at.
I
So
understand, but
it's not something that's,
yeah,
you're
but
looking
with the
at till.
present technology, it looks to be impossible. That's what I'm saying.
I think that's something that we'll have to see because a lot of work is happening on it. But I think when we do these projections of net zero, we need to understand what the global challenge is.
Challenge. This is the challenge.
Absolutely.
Hello.
Thank you.
Let's not get into the mathematical details because things are dynamic, things keep changing. What may be relevant today may not be relevant tomorrow. So let's keep our fingers crossed.
Good
Yeah,
morning.
please.
Thank you, Gauri for a very informative presentation. Just one question, your import-export present slide did not show India as an exporter. Whereas this is the first probably policy which in renewables which government has come out, which is largely export focused. So there is a difference of opinion, I can say. And number two is that if everybody is going to export to Europe and to Japan and Korea, then where is the market? Then I pick up your comment that domestic is the only market left. So does it need a rethink on the policies?
See, I think you are you're a veteran in the renewables field, and you know that when the solar grid connected solar started, there was this socialization of that cost across pan India. So that cost needed to be absorbed for the scale to come in, and you know for us to be able to get solar at less than 2 rupees today. Now, clearly, scale is going to be very important, but so is the cost. And the sense that we are getting now, talking to a large number of developers and stakeholders in this sector, is that unless you can get that scale and reduce the cost by domestic consumption, the competition for the European market, which is going to come up with CBAM very soon, is going to be very intense, because it's not just India looking at exporting to Europe, but all of North Africa, starting from Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Egypt. They're all in the game for actually creating the green hydrogen trade into Africa, into Europe. And you can imagine that the Mediterranean is just very easily doable, and pipelines is probably going to be where it will happen. So I think you can't have scale when you're talking about green hydrogen without domestic consumption also picking up. And that is what is going to give us two advantages, in my view. One is make us leaders in electrolyzer manufacturing, because again, scale is important. And, we know who we are competing with. And the second very important aspect is that with that kind of scale, with the kind of engineering skills that we have, we should be able to bring the cost down. So I think those are going to be the important factors.
Good morning, ma'am. This is Pradeep Sharma from DCM Shriram. You have shown that the total final energy consumption in 2020, 417 exajoule, it will go down to 353 exajoule in by 2050. How is it that energy consumption will go down? It is a shift from fossil fuel to renewables, or the total energy consumption will go down, the requirements will go down. How is it possible? And if you have considered some efficiency levels, how efficient the system will become by 2050?
See, I mean, if I let me just give you the three main drivers for this green transition to happen. Clearly, renewable energy, direct electrification. So, end use sectors like industry, like transportation, and buildings for heating in the cooler climes, and they will start becoming much more electrified, meaning they will start using electricity as their energy source. So that, plus the decline in energy intensity, which a large enabler of this is going to be energy efficiency. We don't talk
Yes.
about energy efficiency enough, But if I had to do a kind of a pie diagram of what will be the key enablers, if 25% will come from renewables, 25% needs to come in from energy efficiency, and 25% from electrification, and the rest from green hydrogen and others. So energy efficiency will also be a major enabler, and we all know that renewables will remain very expensive till you bring in energy efficiency into the system,
Right.
because energy saved is as good as also
Produced.
energy produced.
Thank you.
Yeah, morning, ma'am. Uh, just a small query. You have mentioned in the slide 55% of this transportation is going to happen through retrofitted pipelines. So if you can throw some light, if something is happening right now, some work is going on, or any technical development has happened in that, because a lot of natural gas pipelines we have here in our country, can those be utilized for transportation?
Absolutely. And I mean, I won't even go very far. I'll give you an example. I was speaking to the CEO of GAIL, I think it was last year, in the gas tech. And what he told me is that with the existing pipeline, with some minor modification, we can still do a mix of about 16 to 18% of hydrogen, even in the existing pipelines. And which is why a lot of work is actually being done on improving the material with which the pipelines are made, because as you know that hydrogen is a very it's a it has it cannot be the normal pipelines that will be able to carry hydrogen. So that retrofitting and the research on that is happening in a big way in Europe, which already has a very vast network of pipelines. So we should start seeing some results. I think from next year we should start seeing some good results happening at a commercial level.
Ma'am, sir, thank you very much. Dr. Chakradhar Ayuni, Dimex Green. I'm also a fellow at the European School of Governance. Um, I loved your last slides on indicating systems innovation. I was a little bit disappointed with the critical success factors approach to systems innovation, but I think that's the right approach. One of the things I've been advocating last 4 months, I think we are a demand side economy, and uh, the way to drive the technology. I think last 2 days I've seen a lot of anxiety from the electrolyzer community that they are ready to make electrolyzers, but there's no demand.
Okay.
Right. And I have a feeling that we should take a step back and also put in the market blue or even black or even gray hydrogen, so that we can prime the system, prime the country for using hydrogen. And so I would love to hear some of your thoughts on that. Thank you so much.
So I can only say, I mean, I think the green hydrogen policy that has been announced in India is a great move forward, without a doubt. I think we all understand that policies are always evolving as the market grows, as the feedback comes from the market, comes back from the investors. So I would imagine that the demand side, which needs to be reflected more in the policy, whether it's demand coming from fertilizers, it's demand coming from green steel, from steel makers or from chemicals industry. I think that is something that I'm sure will get strengthened as we move along, because clearly if you don't take care of the off-taker risk, then the growth is not going to happen. I mean, it's quite the kind of growth that you want to see will probably not happen, and which is why I think probably as the policy evolves, we'll see this. It's you've seen this in solar. You have an entity like SECI, which actually takes care of the off-taker risk, and that's what's led to the huge growth of the market, but also bringing the cost down.
One
So
last
I'm
question from the gentleman in the red shirt here.
okay. Prashant Roy, India Hydrogen Alliance. Delighted with your very clear picture that green hydrogen is largely a domestic play, and we broadly agree with that. If you look at the Indian situation, we imported 2.5 million metric tons of gray ammonia last year, and we'll probably continue to do so. We're also going to export 1 million or 2 million tons of green ammonia. Is this a problem that you're seeing anywhere else in the world? How do you suggest this be dealt with? Is it deemed exports, deemed green? It doesn't make sense from the same ports to bring in 2 million tons and send out 2 million tons in terms of shipping carbon costs.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I have to say that there are many countries, as you had also mentioned, that it's probably important to create the ecosystem for hydrogen. And the ecosystem is about, you know, creating the pipelines, creating the infrastructure, creating the capacity for electrolyzer manufacturing, and also these kind of exports and imports really don't make sense. We are really wasting very valuable resources. But I think what's important is that when you talk green ammonia, you're or you talk green steel, what you're looking at is changing the chemistry, the chemical processes, and the whole investment that go into uh, the making of these products. So are fertilizer companies today ready to invest in processes which will take them away from their standard Haber-Bosch process that pretty much dominates the fertilizer sector? And if so, they will. The question that they will ask the government, because a lot of the companies are actually state-owned, is if we invest in this new process, who is going to buy the green ammonia from us, which might come at a small premium? So, these are the kind of evolutions in policy thinking and innovations in policy thinking, which I know India is extremely good at, that we now need to move towards. So, a good foundation has been laid, and now I think it's really the time to add those nuances of taking off-taker risk into account and addressing it, so that there will be investors in steel, for example, because again the process will get changed. Right now, the reduction of iron gets done through coke. You're looking at reduction of iron using hydrogen. So naturally, the whole process in the blast furnaces will change, the chemistry will change. So there are investments that will need to be made. So which is why the off-taker risk getting addressed, long-term visibility for the investors is going to be critical. And I think a policy that's supportive of that will bring in that momentum for green hydrogen that we expect to see in India.
One clarification on demand. I think when people are using the word demand, they're saying industrial demand. By my estimates, of a billion population, of 1 to 4 metric tons consumption per year, that's that's 1,000 million metric tons consumption from the people. So the commodification of the technology and that demand on the consumer side is something that the policy hasn't touched yet, and I've requested honorable sirs to think about it in the future. As you were saying, this is evolving, and all of us have to participate in that. So, am I right in that assumption that when people talk about demand, it's industrial demand and not consumer demand, so to speak? Because we use fuel everywhere. And as I was going through the flood-prone areas of Kerala, and everywhere we were using kerosene and all of that, I was saying, okay, what does it take for me to change it to hydrogen? And what would be the, and I was trying to make some demand estimates to it. So your clarification, ma'am.
I mean, let me put it in a very simple manner. When we switch on the electricity in our homes, do you think whether these are gray electrons or green electrons that are lighting up your homes? You probably don't. You're only looking at electrons that supply you the energy that you need. So for consumers, for a very long time, till that awareness is raised to that level, whether it is green ammonia that they are using in the field, or it is the gray ammonia that is being used in the field, because ammonia is something that they will use for the productivity of their crops. So, I don't expect that the level of consumer awareness will reach that kind of a scale to be able to demand this. So it's going to be much more of industrial demand, and that will not happen if that premium is doesn't get socialized, or there is that the policy addresses the off-taker risk in a way that the manufacturing of that can go up.
I think we're already 2, 3 minutes beyond our allotted time. There must be many more questions. You can catch hold of ma'am anytime outside the hall on a one-to-one basis. And with that, I think allow me, ma'am, to thank you profusely for a wonderful presentation, as well as handling the questions so gracefully. Uh, Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for such an insightful and informative presentation. And as we thank, I would like to request our Joint Secretary MNRE, Mr. Ajay Yadav, sir, to please join us here on stage and expressing our heartful thanks to ma'am and to our distinguished chair of the session. Presentation definitely challenging and inspiring all the stakeholders to add greater speed and scale and momentum and adopt a more systemic approach for innovations, for our policies, and towards our investments as we approach this target and the larger vision of going green. Thank you. So we'll close with a group photograph. Thank you once again very much, ma'am, and thank you to all of you also for being a part of the session. We'll just take a couple of minutes to set the stage towards the next session. That's the Germany perspective which we bring to you. Just allow us 5 minutes or maybe a little lesser, and then we go to start.